Emotionally, women tend to put a greater emphasis on safety and security. We need to satisfy the need. It's not a want, it's a need for safety and security before we can move on, in many cases, to investing our money and putting it to work for us.
You're listening to Investing for Good, a show that brings you the stories and strategies of people who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. And now, here are your hosts, Annie Dickerson and Julie Lamb.
Hey everyone, Annie Dickerson here, together with Julie Lamb. Julie, how are you today?
I am doing fabulous. I am just going through underwriting a bunch of my own personal investments and watching things kind of fly off the shelves. It's amazing how with everything that's going on right now, you would think that people would be afraid and fearful to be buying right now. But in fact, it's the exact opposite. And people are still continuing to buy it. And in a lot of markets, I'm seeing things go with it before I even have time to even do my underwriting. The property is already under contract, and it's wild. I was curious, I know, your husband is a realtor. Is he experiencing the same thing?
He was just looking at his financials over the last several months, and this month is about to be a record month. Highest sales like this year, highest sales like ever for his team.
Wow.
And so I think it's across the board. I think probably what happened was like March, April, when all this stuff, the shelter in place mandates came out, people were, scared. They didn't know what to do. And so they pulled back as you would naturally would, right? But then as things settled down a little bit and people got used to it, now there's this buildup. Right? There were those months that people didn't buy, people didn't sell, and now there's this buildup. And so now people are ready again to get out there. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's so wild. And I think it's good, to see all of this activity happen because it keeps businesses going and it keeps activity going within the economy. And I think that's what didn't happen at the last downturn, and there was no activity at all. I still remember the year that we bought in 2009, our agent had said that she hadn't sold a house in months. And, she was talking with people here and there, but no one was buying anything. And it was like tumbleweeds and nothing, no activity at all. And at least in the Bay Area, so I think it's good. Yeah.
It's tough when, a downturn or recession like this happens to really gain that secure footing to be confident to move forward, which is something we talk about with today's guest, Jean Chatzky, CEO of hermoney.com. And she's also been the financial editor for NBC Today for 25 plus years. She's had a fantastic, very cool journey that we'll dive into in the episode. But when we asked her, because she's passionate about helping women to learn more about finances and investing, just like we are. And we asked her, what are women struggling with? And why aren't they investing more? And so she said one of the big issues is that women are always concerned about safety and security. And so when they look at investments, especially, look at the stock market over the last few months, it's been, up and down and up and down. And so when a lot of women look at that, they turn the other way and they say, you know what, I like the security of just my slow growing savings account, and I'm just going to stick with that.
Yeah. And when we asked her about her long-term concerns as it relates to the future of women and their finances, one of the things that she brought up was that women need to be more conscious about actually getting started. And that is something that we talk about a lot and part of the reason we even have this show is to give women the confidence, and men too, but to give them the confidence to, get educated really is the big point, obviously, about our podcast, is so that they can gain the education and the knowledge. And that's exactly what she said is that education is key. key. And then secondly, she brought up the diversification issue, right? Where you don't just take everything you have and put it all in one place. You put a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there, right? So that if anything were to happen in any one of those asset classes or investments, that you don't lose it all. But the point is that I really took away is that you need to do what you have to do today. We need to do as women to prepare ourselves for the future of unknown. We don't know. You know, a lot of us are married, still young, husbands are still around, but life is short and there's a lot we don't know. And so we as women need to make sure, especially because we generally outlive men, we need to make sure that we're preparing for the future. And one of the best ways to do that is to get yourself educated and actually start making investments and diversify.
Could not agree more. And here is our conversation with Jean Chatzky, where she'll dive into all of that and more. Hey, Jean, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Jean, in addition to being CEO of hermoney.com and host of the Her Money podcast, you're also an accomplished author. You were the financial editor for NBC Today for 25 years, financial ambassador for AARP, and have appeared frequently on Oprah, CNN, and MSNBC. So with all of that, I gotta ask, you must have grown up knowing everything about money, right? You probably knew exactly how to save, what to invest in, and you probably never experienced any financial troubles like the rest of us, right?
Yeah, or not. I mean, I know you and I went to the same university, go Quakers. I was an English major, and I really learned about money through being a financial reporter. But early on in my career, I made every mistake. I mean, credit card debt. I pulled money out of a 401k, which is one of those things that I start to breathe heavy when people talk about because we know it's such a bad idea. I just didn't understand what it was at the time. I didn't really get what I had or the power of what it could turn out to be. I ceded a lot of control over the money in my household to my first husband because I felt like he was better at it than I was. I mean, I have done, quite literally everything wrong, but I am also a case study in the fact that if you put a little effort into it, then you can turn it around.
So how did you become a financial reporter in the first place? So you majored in English.
To me, that was a way into journalism. I really wanted to be a journalist. I spent much of my college life at the school newspaper. I had internships at different magazines every summer. I got out of college and I started applying for jobs as an editorial assistant, which was one of the ways in back then. And I ended up with a job at Working Woman magazine, which no longer exists, but which was kind of a very strange mishmash of a magazine. It was beauty and food and fashion on one hand, but it was also business and careers. And the job I happened to get, because it was the job that was open, was as the assistant to the business editor. So I was able to write stories about things like money and investing and companies and profiles of corporate leaders. And I really liked it. I felt like I had a real knack for it. I had been pretty good at math in high school, and I liked learning the role that math could play in telling these stories. So when I was ready to leave Working Woman, I went and applied for jobs at big business magazines. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to a Forbes or a Fortune or a Money, and nobody would hire me. Hardly anybody would interview me. And eventually I got an interview with a guy at Forbes, chief of reporters there, who told me basically that I didn't have the chops to come work there and that I needed an MBA. And I didn't really want to go back to school. So I thought about it for a while and I definitely floundered. But eventually I realized that he didn't really care if I had an MBA. He cared that I knew how to read a balance sheet. He cared that I understood financial statements. And so I started applying for jobs on Wall Street and ended up working in the equity research department at Dean Witter for a couple of years and learned that, and then went back into journalism.
So you got some real life experience instead of going back to the classroom to study.
Exactly.
Love
Smart. Okay, so it sounds like you didn't intend necessarily to get into finance, but it sort of fell into your lap, but you realized that you loved it and you had a passion for it. And so you go to Dean Witter, you study all this. I don't even know what you study there. You were an equity researcher? Is that what you said?
Equity research. Yeah, I was like a junior equity research analyst in the healthcare sector. So I supported a few analysts who were writing a lot of reports. And then I went and I got a job at Forbes as a fact checker. Cut my salary from Wall Street in half. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And from there, I went to Smart Money magazine. And that's how I got into personal finance. And that's also how I got on television.
So was that what you were aiming for through all of these different roles? Was you wanted to get back into into journalism and into personal finance? Was that the trajectory where you were headed?
I definitely wanted to get back into journalism. I definitely wanted to get back into business journalism. The move to Smart Money was kind of an interesting one. I mean, it definitely changed my life in so many great ways. But when I took that job, I had a lot of reservations about taking it. I was doing well at Forbes. I was getting to write a lot, but I was a fact checker, and it was going to take me a while to get promoted to be a writer or a reporter on my own. And they were offering me this at Smart Money, the opportunity to come in as a writer, which was incredibly appealing. But at the time, personal finance, this was the very early 90s, personal finance was thought to be kind of a backwater, at least in journalistic circles. Like, people did not want to go into personal finance. And I remember quitting my job at Forbes and having this parade of editors that I respected come into my cubicle and just tell me that I was throwing my career down the drain. And I picked up the phone and I called the guy who was going to be my boss, and I said, I don't know that I want to come anymore. I don't want to spend my life writing about mutual funds and 12B1 fees. And he said, you never have to write about 12B1 fees. You can write about anything. The amazing thing about personal finance is it's just about people and money. So bring me interesting stories about people and their money, and you can write whatever you want. And I thought, okay, that is really, really interesting. And that is, I think, how I've stayed interested in personal finance for 3 decades now, because I really have never, this guy, his name is Steve Swartz. He now runs the Hearst Corporation. Was brilliant. He was like the youngest front page editor the Wall Street Journal had ever had. And he, but that was a really, really, really wonderful way to be able to look at this topic.
Yeah. So you were writing about mutual funds and 12B1 fees. And then all of a sudden, Steve says, he unleashes you, right? He's like, really, you have the freedom to write about anything. So, which is, often when we get that freedom, it's exciting, but it's also daunting, right? Because it's like, oh, well, where do I go? Where do I start? So what did you do next? When he said that, did you look into your personal life at what you were doing with your own finances? Did you look at friends and family? How did you know what you were going to write about?
Yes, all of the above. We used to have these story idea meetings at Smart Money, and we would call them real life magazine, because we were all at the age where we were, various ages, but we were doing things like having children and buying houses and getting insurance policies and figuring out what was the best credit card and figuring out how to buy a cell phone plan. And, we wrote about all of that. I wrote profiles about people and their money. I wrote stories about the travails of couples who were adopting babies and what a roller coaster that was. And people who bought franchises and what a roller coaster that, I mean, we could write about anything. I wrote the very first big story on Quicken, which at that time had sort of started to gain a cult following, and stories about the early use of the internet to manage money. I mean, it was just, it was all possible. You just had to find the way in.
And through all of this, I mean, I have to imagine that at the time you were sort of taking the personal finance world by storm, because it sounds like a lot of the other articles that were out there, or the stories that were out there, were, more traditional, let's say, about budgeting, about investing. And here you were writing about real life and real stories and real people and how they related with their money. Was that what sort of made you stand out and what took you to the next level?
Definitely didn't make me stand out. It made the magazine stand out. Smart Money was a real breath of fresh air in the personal finance world. But I think the timing was also fortuitous. We started publishing right around the time that 401ks took off, and people realized that they had a lot more responsibility for their money than they ever had before because of the demise of the pension system. And so we were in the right place at the right time. The magazine had really, really brilliant editors. I mean, not just Steve Swartz, but Stuart Emmerich, who would go on to run the styles section at the New York Times for many, many years. I mean, he just gave it so much fun and so much life. And, and it had a tone, it had an edge. It was fantastic. I think, I broke out because I got the opportunity to talk about one of my stories on television, and then ended up doing that as sort of an early side gig.
I'm curious. So now that you've spent all these years in the personal finance space, you must have seen lots of different ups and downs. And, I'm curious to hear your perspective on everything that's going on now with COVID-19. It's something that we've not quite seen before. So what's your take on it, and where do you think we're headed, and what advice do you have for people?
Oh boy, that's a very, very broad question. I think a couple of things. I think this is a time to focus on controlling the things that you can control. And that is true of your investing. It's true of your saving. It's true of your spending. It's true of whether or not you decide to put on a mask or go into a bar. And we have the ability to only do so much for our own financial and overall lives. We can't control the markets. We can't control interest rates. We can't control what Washington is going to do, but we can try to maintain good health in our own personal economy by making the right decisions about those sorts of things.
Yeah. There's so much going on right now. And I think so many women out there might be feeling, I don't know, kind of lost and unsure and, not know what direction to move. And I think the instinct, particularly for women out there, is to kind of turn inward and to not really do anything. And so I know that you're the host of the podcast For Money, and you've also written books on women in finance. So I'd love to kind of transition a little bit and find out how you got into, moving from personal finance to having a focus on women and personal finance, and why that's important to you.
I mean, in a micro sort of way, it's important to me because I am a woman. My friends are women. My mother's a woman. My daughter's a woman. I mean, I do feel like over the years, I've always thought that, and I got some pushback for this. I don't think women necessarily need different investments. Jane Bryant Quinn, who I have followed for many, many years, likes to say that stocks aren't pink or blue, they're green, or that money isn't pink or blue, it's green. And she's totally right. But there are differences as far as women are concerned. And one of those differences, there are the statistical ones that we still make less money, that we are still the ones who take breaks from work to care for kids and older parents. And that means that when we get to retirement, the combo of those breaks and our lower wages means we have less money for retirement, and then we have to make that money last longer because we outlive men. There's the factual piece of the puzzle, but then there's also the emotional piece of it. And emotionally, women tend to put a greater emphasis on safety and security. We need to satisfy the need. It's not a want, it's a need for safety and security before we can move on, in many cases, to investing our money and putting it to work for us. And that can really hold us back, because when we keep far too much of our money in cash, it's not working. In fact, it's losing purchasing power, as you guys know, year after year. So I think what brought me to focus on women was trying to solve for those issues, and recognizing that when you can provide women with a community, with a safe space to talk about these issues and ask questions in a way that we feel comfortable asking our questions, then not only do we do it, but we do it really well. So that was my aim in starting Her Money.
I love that. I love that, because that is so much of what Annie and I have come together for, why we even partnered in the first place, why we have our company, Goodegg Investments, why we have this podcast. Is it was all in an effort from that first conversation that we had when we met 2.5 years ago, was we believed that if we could create a community and a safe place for women to ask questions, because women learn differently than men, that we believe that we could help them through these different channels that we have. So I love that.
We'll get back to our conversation with Jean in just a minute.
Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but aren't sure you have the time or the desire to manage the investment? Perhaps you're afraid, like we were, that you'll make the mistake of choosing the wrong market or the wrong team and lose your entire investment. Well, that's exactly why we created the Goodegg Investor Club. We do the work of identifying solid real estate investment opportunities in the best markets around the country, and then partner with you to acquire these investments, and then we'll all share in the returns. We'll identify the growing markets, strong, experienced teams, and the solid deals. We do all the heavy lifting of managing the tenants and the renovations, and as a passive partner, you get to enjoy all the benefits of investing in real estate: monthly cash flow, long-term appreciation, and the ongoing tax benefits. When we first discovered passive investing through real estate syndications, we realized it fit perfectly into our busy lives. We could put our money to work for our families, work less, and get more time back in our days so that we could focus on what matters most and discover our true passion and purpose in life. We've now helped hundreds of people invest passively in real estate syndications and are seeing the positive impact it's had on their lives. We invite you to partner with us by joining the Goodegg Investor Club today, so you can start putting your money to work for you and get more time back in your day, because we know that when people have more time in their days, they can do the true work they were intended to do, and the world will be a better place. To sign up for the Goodegg Investor Club, go to goodegginvestments.com/invest, and we'll take it from there. That's goodegginvestments.com/invest.
And now, back to our chat with Jean Chatzky.
I did want to ask you, because you're the host of this podcast, you've written these books on women and money. What do you feel like is the biggest problem that women are facing for their futures as it relates to money? What is like kind of the biggest thing that you see that if women don't kind of take a hold of this, that they're going to see down the road?
I'm worried in a short-term sense about COVID, and about the fact that we've seen this produce what a lot of people are calling a she-cession, that it is women who are being thrust in many, many cases back into the traditional roles of caretaking. And there seems to be no solution for that at this point. I'm worried about the possibility that just as we were making strides to talk more about salary, take additional steps to close the gender gap, find the support of big companies that said, we are going to work on this. We understand it's a problem and we're going to work to solve it.
Right.
I worry that just as those steps were underway, we have taken 5 steps back. And I don't think any of us know yet, until we can solve for the virus and we can get kids back into school, how that's all going to shake out. In the short term, I'm very worried about that. In the long term, I think that we need to make sure that we are a little planful about our futures, a little more conscious about getting started and just staying on track and not letting years, if not decades, go to waste.
That's such a good point. I think that from what I understand and talking with so many women, that there's such a fear with women and making mistakes, choosing the wrong investment, losing their money. And I think it goes back to what you said about the safety and security, that they feel like they have to have that. And so when they spend this money, or not spend, but when they invest this money and there's this potential, right, to lose it all, I think that's the reason that so many women don't get started or lose and then don't continue ever again, because they're just fearful of that.
Well, and I think there's some education needed in the fact that investing is not gambling, right? We're not going to lose it all. In the short term, as long as you diversify, the portfolio could go down. It may very well go down, but in the long term, as long as you are sticking with a diversified, low-cost strategy, historically, we've seen you're going to do fine. And so I think Fidelity did some very interesting focus groups, and they sponsor the Her Money podcast, and I pay attention to a lot of their research because it's fabulous. They were very surprised at the number of times the word gambling came up when we were talking about stocks.
Yes, it's true. I think a lot of women, just when they think about the ups and downs, right? I've heard a lot of women talk about the ups and downs of the stock market, and they get so scared looking at the green arrow versus the red arrow, right? And each day not knowing. And with, with everything else that most women have going on in life, the carpools, planning dinner, grocery shopping, laundry, like everything else, the last thing you want to do is have to worry that the financial foundation of your life feels shaky, right?
Yeah.
But then I think once women learn that it's not just about the day-to-day, it's about the long-term growth, whether it be in stocks or real estate or other investments, it's about that long-term growth, then you can take the fear out of the day-to-day ups and downs, which is, I think, what a lot of women are seeing now.
And it's about measured risk. Right? I mean, I talk to a lot of women who are in the 10 years before retirement. And this is the group of people that has been, I think, shaken the most by the incredible volatility that we've seen in the markets, because although retirement itself can last 30 years, it's the period of time where you just don't want to lose all that much money. And there has been a lot more interest in solutions for making the money that you've accumulated last, and knowing that you can, in fact, cobble together solutions that will help you essentially put together a personal pension. That you can use things like annuities to cover your fixed expenses in retirement in combination with Social Security, while leaving a portion of your portfolio in the market for growth that is necessary. It doesn't have to be an either or.
I'm curious, Jean, because you mentioned early on you're sort of a case study, and you've learned a lot of things over the years and made some mistakes and learned from those mistakes and explored lots of different topics in personal finance. So what are you investing in, or, how does your portfolio look, and what's your day-to-day like? Are you like changing out your stock? Are you trading out your stocks?
Never.
Or is it?
No. No, that's not me. I mean, I have an asset allocation. I have a financial advisor. I put money in. That's what I do. I put money in through my retirement accounts and through my brokerage accounts outside my retirement account on a regular basis. It's pretty much automated. And so, no. I mean, right now, what you asked about my day to day, I mean, the biggest impact that COVID has had on my financial life is that my husband and I are in the process of moving, or we thought we were in the process of moving. And we purchased a place in Philadelphia. We're in the process of renovating, like serious reno. And then COVID hit and work completely stopped. And so we thought that we would have sold our house at this point and have, if not moved, be very close to moving. So the change in our portfolio is that we're a little heavy in real estate right now because we're still holding on to that house. But we'll get there. We'll figure it out.
Well, real estate is something we love. So yeah, in our opinion,
Nothing
you can never be too heavy on real estate. I'm also curious, with all of the conversations you've had with women and the questions you've gotten in through Her Money, what are some of the top questions or struggles that women have?
I get a lot of trade-off questions. Should I save for college or retirement? Should I pay off my mortgage or should I pay down debt? Should I, those kinds of hierarchical questions. I get a lot of questions about how to find a good financial advisor. A lot of questions about kids and college and what is okay to borrow and what's not. I just worked on an exciting project for the folks at Chegg, the textbook company. If you go to cheggmoney.com, you can see that work. But for recent grads and college students, I'm very proud of the library of information that we were able to put up there. I get asked a lot about long-term care insurance. Yeah, you name it.
So then also you mentioned textbooks, right? And the next generation. So in terms of helping the next generation, helping kids while they're still young to learn about money so that they can grow up and have that solid foundation under them and already hit the ground running. What have you taught your own kids about money, and what do you think is important for kids to learn about money as they're growing up?
I think the most important thing for kids to learn about money is that money is a limited resource, and they have to figure out how to allocate their resources in a way that serves their needs and makes them happy. And I think an allowance can be a fabulous teaching tool for that. I just think that a lot of people don't do it correctly. An allowance should come with a list of things that you are no longer going to buy for your child, but that your child wants, so that you are forcing them into this place where they have to make decisions about how they're going to use their money. And that list of things and the amount of allowance should grow over the years so that by the time kids go off to college, they understand how to manage a budget, because that's basically what you've taught them.
I love that. Do you ever talk about investing like strategies with your kids? Did you ever bring them into any investments when they were younger, anything like that?
I tried when they were younger. They weren't particularly interested. We did some savings challenges at home when they wanted things that were more expensive than they could buy with their allowance or their babysitting money. We created a homegrown 401k and we matched what they saved so that they would actually succeed, because you want your kids to succeed when they're trying to save for a goal. I did have, once my son started working, we opened an account with a robo-advisor and a Roth IRA with that robo. And that has really, that and the bull market have converted him into being an investor, because, when the markets are rising, we're all brilliant. And he's been able to automatically contribute every single month, but watch that account grow in a pretty significant way. And that's been fun for him.
Yeah, I love that. And the importance of not just the asset allocation and knowing that money is a limited resource, but having the discipline to make those decisions, and also knowing, having the discipline for the delayed gratification, which I think is so important for kids these days. Julie, tell the story real quick about how you're involving your kids in the real estate investment.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so many different ways, but primarily as we invest in real estate syndications. And so I've offered my kids the opportunity to, take $100 and, either they spend that and then it's gone, or they can invest the $100 and they can watch it grow. And every month they can get, a $2 distribution. And at the end of 2 years, they would get their $100 back plus an additional $50. And then they would still have their money, but they would, earn some money, not a lot, this teaching them this idea of putting their money to work for them. And
Sure.
My girls are 8 and 7. And even at that age, we started this probably when they were about, my oldest was 5 or 6. And even on that level at that age, they were able to grasp this idea of, hey, either I can spend this money and that $100 will be gone forever. I'll never see it again. And yes, I'll have an item or whatever it is, or I can take that $100 and invest it and put it to work for me so that I can then take that money, save it, and buy what I want and still have my $100. And so what I was trying to do is help them understand this idea of putting money to work for you so that they can, grasp that. Because I think even as adults, it's hard for people to understand that, right? They think it's this fear of like, okay, I'm letting this $100 go, I might lose it. And there's all this fear. And so getting them used to the idea of putting it out to work with the potential. And we talk a lot about risks. And I tell them,
I was wondering, I mean, the $2 a month, is that what you say? $2 a month. So that's a pretty substantial return, right? On the 100.
Yeah.
Did you inflate the return for them so they could actually see a bigger payoff?
I did.
And B, what do you do in months where there isn't a profit?
Yeah. So for us in the investments that we're doing, we haven't had those months yet. And in the investments that we're doing, but I talk to them a lot about the risks that are involved. And I make sure that before they say yes, that they understand. I ask them to repeat it to me. I ask them, well, why does that matter? How does that happen? And they weren't so much able to explain that to me 2 years ago, but my daughter, who's now 8.5, she starts to really grasp it. And I, when we go out to different properties and we're driving around and I show them, I say, here is the type of things that we're purchasing together. And then I review, sort of all the risks and the things that are involved and what can go wrong. And especially with right now, what's happening with COVID and people losing their jobs. And I ask them, how does that affect your potential to get returns? And then we talk about job loss and we talk about people not being able to pay and how that's where their money comes from. So I think a lot of it is just introducing these ideas at a very young age, because I didn't learn about any of this until, the last 5 years, right? So it's been, it's so great. I wish I learned about this when I was a child, just to even have it introduced to me as a topic. So yeah, it's something that Annie and I are very passionate about, which I did want to ask you a little bit about the charitable foundation and the magazine Time for Kids. Is that Time for Kids to Launch Your Money? Is that the name of the magazine?
The magazine is called Your Money, and we are supported by the PwC Charitable Foundation.
Okay.
Thank them for that. We've been doing this for 5 years. So every month we produce, in combination with Time for Kids, a financial literacy magazine that goes to 2 million fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. And it is distributed with Time for Kids. It is a passion project of mine, but it's been great. And for people who have their kids at home and are looking for different things to teach their kids, it's available online at timeforkids.com/yourmoney.
Okay, great. We'll definitely add that to the links after in the show. So tell us a little bit about, I do want to find out a little bit more about that. Is it like, what are some of the topics that you're teaching about? I mean, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, that's like...
we can teach about anything, right? I mean, we're really, right now, the back to school issue is about how COVID has changed the economy. We have a profile of kids who have started charities coming up in November for our Thanksgiving issue. October is all about Zoom as a stock. It's about what moves the stock market, and but we focused on Zoom because kids have been using it in their classrooms. They know it. And there've been ups and downs as Zoom has hit. I mean, the stock has done incredibly well, but there've been some ups and downs as there have been privacy concerns over the last couple of months. So we were able to talk about that. We've done lessons on supply, and we did a great story last year year on the Popeyes chicken sandwich, and it was all about supply and demand. It was just meant to teach, this is a lesson in supply and demand. So we get at different topics, different financial topics in different ways.
Do you guys talk about real estate at all?
We have talked about real estate. We have talked about, what does it take to buy a house? And we've talked about buying versus renting. So yeah.
Nice. Well, I'll definitely have to go check that out for sure. So I know there's so much more that we could chat with you about, but we have to move on to our Investing for Good impact round. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions around investing for good.
Okay.
So the first question is investing in yourself. So what is one way that your investments are helping you to live a better life?
My investments, and I was very taken. I did an interview a couple weeks ago with a guy named Ken Dykewald, who runs a company called Age Wave. He's probably the country's leading researcher in aging. And he has a new book out, and he said, did you know that 80% of people have never even bothered to figure out how much money they're going to need in retirement? Mm-hmm. Which was astonishing, right? I mean, how for me, I like running the numbers. And by running the numbers and by having a plan, I no longer feel that sense of worry. I know that I'm going to be fine. And so my investments have helped me with that.
Yeah, I think, so much of what Annie and I do is it always goes back to having that roadmap, to having a sense of direction of, where you're at and where you're trying to go in the near term and in the long term. And I would say that for sure for us as well, it gives me that comfort to know that, we're heading into a place that feels safe and comfortable. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier around safety and comfort with women. So I love that. Okay. Second question is investing in others. So what is one investment strategy or investment hack that you might be able to share with our audience that will help them catapult their investing journey?
Automate. I got divorced at age 40. And I felt like I was starting over in terms of putting enough money aside to help pay for half of my kids' college, to putting money aside for retirement. I automated contributions into every account that I set up, and I have continued to do it that way. And it just takes the pain out of it, because you make a good decision one time and you get to benefit from that decision for years and years and years.
Yeah, I still remember when I was younger and I was working my first job out of college, and my mom had, every time I got like a small raise, she would tell me, now pretend like you didn't get that raise and take that money and put it into your 401k or whatever it was, or save the money. And that was sort of one of the lessons that I still use today is, every time our income increases or we have a little bit of extra money, we still live very much within our means, and we take that money and then we invest it to help us live the life that we want to live, which is by design. So I love that advice. Okay, last question is investing in the world. So what is one way or one thing that your investments are doing right now to perhaps make the world a better place?
Well, two things. A few years ago, I opened a charitable gift fund, a donor advised fund. I did it at Fidelity, although all the big firms have these. And I started contributing to that on an annual basis with the goal that I could not just give money away, but then grow money to give away. And so I love the process of donating out of this fund, because it almost feels like you're donating free money, because you gave it away a long time ago. Now you just get to decide what's the very best use for it. So we support a lot of heart-related charities in my family. And so I've used the money in recent years for that, along with, in the past few months, COVID and Black Lives Matters organizations.
That's so cool. That's really the power of putting your money to work for you. No longer do you have a finite resource here that you can only give away once, but now you're growing your money and you're able to help more and more organizations and more people. I love it. I love everything about your story and your journey and all that you're doing to help people. So Jean, if our listeners want to learn more about all that you're doing, what's the best place that they can go to learn more about you?
Go to hermoney.com, and while you're there, please sign up for our newsletters. We publish 2 newsletters every week. They're free. We publish a new podcast every single week. You can get it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And we're putting up fresh content every single day. Please join us.
Awesome. Jean Chatzky, CEO of hermoney.com and host of the Her Money podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey and your wisdom with us today, Jean.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Investing for Good, the #1 podcast for people like you who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. For more resources, check out goodegginvestments.com/podcast and be sure to join the Investing for Good Facebook community. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you amazing new conversations every week. Until next time, keep investing for good.